We are recording. Okay, congratulations. Welcome to Fuck Shit Up, meeting number 2, 2023. I have one proposed topic that I don't even know if Bobby or Cole, we haven't had a conversation in advance, so I don't even think you know about this unless you're psychic. But Allison, who is another consultant that USPG has been working with, we met sometime this week, last week, something like that. I guess it was last week. And she posed a question. So that's the question I want to pose to Fuck Shit Up. But before we do that, almost all of you that are in attendance text messaged me that you can only be here for a little bit. Because we only have one topic, I don't even think that this call is going to last an hour.
Sweet.
So you're all good to go unless you have a raucous conversation, and then I will hang in here as long as I can. But before we do that, Cole, Madam President, I call every president Madam because sometimes I'm correct. Madam President, you are on, and I don't know how long you can be on. Do you have any presidential things that you would like to say and or talk about, report, anything like that? And then Bobby, I'll come to you as our board liaison and see if you have anything you want to say. Otherwise, I will pose my question. Cole.
No, I don't have anything specific that I wanted to launder through this group at this time. We are in a phase where new members can get the rest of this year and all of next year for the price of a single year's membership. So anyone who's thinking about joining, this could be a good time. Jeffrey, I've been meaning to reach out to you specifically about figuring out a way to get Turning Tables involved as possibly like a community membership. That we have a whole like tier of nonprofit organizations that are mission aligned that can get memberships that way, or like organizational memberships that way. I'm meeting up with Matt Ray in a couple of days, and we're going to talk about a strategy for getting other orgs in. But been thinking about that. But that's
also I would just suggest real quick, just maybe try to, because we're starting on the 7th. So that first week is orientation week. So maybe you, as being president, and also since you're here in New Orleans, we'll just schedule you a time and you come on down and you talk to us that way.
I would love that. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll reach out off of this call.
Okay.
But yeah, so just the timing of the memberships. Last year we had returning members could also get that 18-month window, but we realized a lot of people were trying to game the system. So now if you're a returning member at this point in the year, you can get a prorated membership, which is, so you're not getting penalized. You still get the cost adjusted price of membership, but we're not doing the returning member 18-month offer that we did last year. But yeah, that's just the timing of the membership. Is the only thing that I feel people should probably be aware of. But that's it. Bob,
liaison to the board. I also know that you can't stay on very long, and you're
no, I really don't have anything right now. I'm just getting ready to get off to work here. So the 25th, we are announcing Team USBG for the IBA for the Pan Am and the World Cocktail Championship in Rome. That's about all I have.
Super duper. How are things going planning wise for the conference in Phoenix?
Everything is on track and ready to roll.
Excellent. I'm sorry that I'm not going to be able to join y'all. My airport is closing for construction. I know, and I live in the middle of nowhere, so that's kind of like a big deal for me. So have a great time, y'all.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll miss you.
I know. That's really probably my whole point is, can y'all miss me so much that you want me to come back?
For those who aren't aware, I used to live very close to where Jess does. Every road that leads away from Jess's home becomes a winding 2-lane mountain road prone to landslides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the airport is remodeling. So they will reopen, but they are closed for 2 weeks, conveniently right when the college is opening. So it's going to be a shit show here. But that's all right. No, Alina, do you have any reports or anything that you want to throw out there? I just want to make that available to you. Jeffrey, I'll ask you the same question. Alina?
No, not so much. I know I've missed the last few meetings we had because I had work conflicts, so I just wanted to make sure I'm here to get a little bit back in the loop about what's going on.
Oh, well, conveniently, you've only missed one meeting because this is only the second one. So don't be so hard on yourself.
Okay.
Okay. Jeffrey, any questions, comments, anything for the peanut gallery?
I mean, I missed sort of the first, like sort of missed most of the first one when we were starting to actually get into it. So, I need a little catching up myself.
Oh, well, that's cool. So each meeting is its own standing
Yeah.
free thing because people come and go. I don't even remember what the topic was last time.
I just have to look at the notes. That's all. Again.
Yeah. I just got back from vacation. So like, I barely know what the hell is going on. I'm working on a new book and I literally cannot remember what I saved the document as. That's how you know vacation was good.
Good.
No idea. Anyway, so, okay, I will propose today's discussion topic. And I also propose we will probably be done with this before top of the hour. So then everybody can go do whatever you need to do. I'm recording this. I will send the recording out to everyone. And hopefully maybe someone somewhere will actually watch it and or reply with their own thoughts. So Allison and I were chatting. So Allison is a consultant that's working directly with the national board. And she does way more like strategic planning, governance, procedure, protocol stuff. I do not do that stuff. I do mostly DEI and then how diversity, equity, inclusion is embedded in an organization, not just like a line and a strategy, but like actually the whole point of the organization is to become an inclusive, belonging space. So she and I had a conversation and it was fantastic. So then she was asking me about Fuck Shit Up and like what role does it play and how can she support Fuck Shit Up and how can Fuck Shit Up support the stuff she's doing. So we have one question to pose to random folks. So welcome random folks, which is not really that random because it's two super dedicated vocal members and two national board members, one of which is president, one of which has been in USBG for 400,000 years. I think, Bobby, is that correct? 400,002, maybe 400,003. Anyway, so here is the question that we are posing. Regardless of your current experience or position, just be a person who's a member of USBG for just a second. You are not limited to any rules, any existing policies, any best practices, budget, gravity, nothing. This is a unicorn question. If you could create an opening for any skill or ideology or experience to serve on a national leadership level, who would you like, not necessarily a name, but like a metaphorical person, who would you think should be in the national leadership positioning of USBG? What skills, what experience, what kind of person, what kind of experience, what kind of skills? Are you following my word cloud question? For not chapter leaders, not regional leaders, but for all the national of USBG, let's say that the board has 30 more positions. And so you're going to have to fill a whole bunch of seats all at once. Who would you be looking for and what kind of experience would you think would be good mixed in to a board of directors on a national level? That is my question.
A union organizer.
Excellent. What does that mean for you, Jeffrey?
So here in New Orleans, I was invited to a union. I think their number is 23 out here. And the thing is that I support the union, but unfortunately with unions that are here and most hotels around the United States is very anachronistic. So if we're talking about just trying to do cocktails, most people don't give a shit. And the thing is that I noticed that there are more hotels overseas and just a few in the United States are actually embracing that craft cocktail thing. But usually, especially with the hotels down here, it's basically just the basic shit. It's hurricanes and margaritas and stuff like that. But I do see that there could be something in terms of maybe these businesses that might have a couple across the country of how to organize for workers to take care of themselves, and also for that company to take care of their workers and demand that they take care of those workers if they're not being financially compensated.
Great. That's awesome. Other ideas. Let's
I
say
was
there's,
going to say the exact same thing.
oh, great. Well, Alina, what does a union organizer mean to you? Because it might mean something different.
Or not even a union organizer necessarily, but someone that is linked into what's currently happening as far as labor organizing, that could be a liaison between what we're doing as a guild and, you know, what local and national union groups are doing as far as things for, like, you know, minimum wage and worker protections and things like that. Because I think that's something where as a guild, we don't necessarily focus on it, even though that seems like the reason to have a guild would be for like worker protection, group bargaining. Like, it's in our mission that we are essentially raising the standard for the conditions that our members work in. So I would
When I
love to actively do more of that.
Sorry, Alina. I would take it one step further and even say that my understanding of the mission and vision, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong, is by elevating the standards of all hospitality, that's anyone, whether they're a member of USBG or not, whether
Yeah.
they're a union member or not, like hospitality ought to be better, and USBG is striving to set that better standard. That's like a big floofy floof.
I agree, but I sort of think that, again, you know, and I'm talking about from my experiences working in hotels, have been less than ideal just because of the fact that I don't want to do shit that's already happened when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And the idea that the hotels are the ones who are trying to push this sort of narrative, where it should be up to the people who see how things are progressing and how things work to have a say in the way that, like, hospitality is not going to change unless there are people there to change it. And the larger corporations are the ones who are keeping it sort of the same.
Interesting. All right, Cole put in the chat, I'd love to see some representation from hospitality unions in the guild. Great. I have a similar idea that I would like to throw out for y'all to beat the hell out of, or fuck shit up with. And that is like, I don't know how this would work, but some kind of like human resources supervision management expertise. So many folks either are lone wolves working totally on their own, or they work in environments where I think a lot of the members turn to the USBG thinking that they or their chapters is the HR department. So they're going to hold an employer accountable for work culture or toxic work culture or work treatment. And that's not the USBG's role. But there's also not a lot of human resources supervision management experience that is available to a lot of people who work in places that are also USBG members. What are your thoughts on that? Right direction, wrong direction?
Right direction in the terms of resource management, wrong in using HR because HR has been bastardized by, again, corporations. So HR basically for corporations is just looking out for the interest of the corporation.
100%. It's like its job. Yeah.
I think I would. Oh, sorry.
No, go.
No, I think I would like to see that. I agree, something like that. But I think the most powerful thing that we could do as an organization like ours is to make sure that our members know what their rights are legally and the standards that they should legally be treated by. And once people are aware of things, like I've worked for so many employers that have done things illegally, either with the money I'm making, the harassment that's happening, the way that they hire. And once people know what that standard is, then they can react to it and hold people accountable versus not knowing.
Interesting. Great. Other anybody in the whole wide world, any skill set, any experience that you would instantaneously fill 30 billion extra seats with?
I mean, do we have someone on a national level that's focused on health. I know that it's something that our organization talks a lot about, but I don't know if we have a specific board position that's really focused on health and well-being.
There's a health and wellness committee. Bobby, refresh my memory. I think that might have been rolled into the education committee as like a subcommittee recently. There was a dedicated health and wellness committee for a while, but it was sort of, there was a lot of overlap in what they were doing relative to the education committee. So I think they might have been subsumed there at our last, the last time we evaluated board level committee structure.
Excellent.
Yeah, they were rolled into education because a lot of the education they were doing just made sense for them to be part of that group as well. It gave them more resources, but the foundation also does a lot of health and wellness activities. And if you listen to the IG Live on, I think it's on Thursdays, you would hear a lot of the different help that's out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's, sorry, I'm trying to get in my car and get to work. But that's, that's what's out there now. Going back to the union question or comment, that is a really rough one. I mean, I grew up in a union family. My father was president for unions for years. My job at the newspaper, I had to deal a lot with labor relations. And it's a two-edged sword. Hang on a minute. And it's rough because, unions, I seen as a kid, watch unions get all the rights for and benefits and holiday pay and overtime. But then they got a little sidetracked and they got really out of whack. And they were more into it for themselves, the union leadership. So I would love to see unions come back, but back is the basis of what they were, really fighting for the members and not just for themselves. And you see that in a lot of places, though.
It's fascinating how many different industries have had the same experience with either union representation or even just like internal leadership representation. And it makes me want to draw the conclusion that like schmucks do shitty things with power, regardless of what kind of organization it is, even if it's an organization that's supposed to be dismantling power dynamics. I feel like most of my clients are kind of dealing with that right now. Cole also put in educational programming surrounding workers' rights. So I want to throw that out there. And
it seemed like that's kind of what Alina was suggesting, that we have more of that you take more of our bandwidth and use that to help our audience understand their rights in the workplace.
Oh, okay, got it. I'm glad that got clarified. What I was also going to say, and this kind of goes back to what Bobby was saying too, is that I'm curious if a national board was able to expand in number and specific skill sets, that it might even be recruiting people who are outside of the USBG to come in with those skill sets, bringing those experiences into the national board. Right now, all the national board are fairly visible members who have kind of, for lack of better words, risen the ranks in the pipeline of involvement. And I don't know that to Bobby's point, I don't know that there's that much clarity about what the foundation does versus what the National Board of Directors do related to health and wellness, but related to kind of anything. I think they just get smushed together in a similar way that there's not a lot of clarity between staff and National Board of Directors, foundation, and chapter leadership. Chapters and nationals, like all that stuff needs to be clarified. I'm curious to see if there's a way that this fictitious idea of more skill sets from the inside and from the outside sitting at the national table, how those things would get clarified. Other thoughts, comments, or ideas?
It's definitely something to chew on.
It's fun.
Yeah.
This is where I become annoying. Who should not be invited in to a national board leadership position of some sort? What skills are not needed? What people experiences are not warranted in that space?
Diageo.
Great.
I think that there's something to be said for the USBG. Like there already are organizations that are speaking out for that owner group, right? And I'm saying this as a bar owner, but relatively small scale. So places like the National Restaurant Association, they're like their advocacy work is focused almost exclusively on bar owners and the interests of restaurant owners and people in that tier. And so I don't know that we need to be that, because that already exists. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, necessarily cooperate when our interests align with theirs, because they will sometimes. But I think smaller operators, not to, position myself as being exactly where I am already positioned is the ideal, but smaller operators, but really just like boots on the ground service industry workers. There aren't national organizations that seem to be effectively advocating for their interests and working towards their betterment overall. So I think larger chain restaurant owners and to what Jeffrey said, like larger brand owners necessarily. I think there's room for brand reps. I think those relationships with local bartenders are important. That one of the guild has done a pretty good job of cultivating those over the years. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But I think maintaining our focus sort of on like boots on the ground service industry rather than like higher level management and ownership. Not that they're not welcome, but I just don't think that should be the focus.
I agree.
Agreed. I feel that, especially with the NRA, with the chains of places that we might go to because we see it as a lark or something like that, those people are the ones who are getting their asses handed to them by these people, because the NRA is not really focused in on them. It's more focused on the owners. But you're saying as a small person, you got two spots. I mean, there could be something with people on a local level of people who are trying to band together to help workers and stuff like that on that scale. But on a larger scale, large corporations and shit like that, you keep them at arm's length. It hasn't done anything. It hasn't done any good for us at all, honestly.
Yeah, I think that anyone that's in a sponsorship position for an organization shouldn't be represented in the decision-making arm of our organization. Because it's one thing to work with a large liquor brand or a restaurant group as a sponsor, but that's when it's even more important that they're not, making the decisions about what our programming is.
100.
Yeah, I don't mind taking money for programming when that programming is mission aligned, but I don't want a lot of strings with it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Or have them really direct the organization beyond just like, hey, we would like to do this program. Do you want to partner with us? That's fine. But yeah, that representation at the national leadership level, I don't think is what we necessarily want. But then again, it's a big tent, right? So I think having one or two people who it's also, I'm not saying I want to, this is sort of contrary to what I was saying just before, but it's like if you completely box out those voices, then it becomes a bit of a silo. So I think that sort of Lincoln-esque team of rivals approach is like you do want to have some amount of, you want to understand what that group is saying so that you can act accordingly. But if you can completely keep them out of the conversation, then they're sort of operating in silence in a way that can be, that if your goal is to sort of counterweigh them, having them not be there at all puts you in doesn't help you do that.
one thing that I'm hearing that I want to make sure I explicitly state, and then y'all can say, no, that's not what we're saying, is keeping corporate representation, corporate money, the corporatization of hospitality out of national representation, unless it has something to do with the community, local ownership, supporting local, smaller, boots on the ground kind of pieces of hospitality. But those corporations would have to prioritize that and probably live that to show that that's what they're doing, instead of corporatizing like Pac-Man, this kind of smaller venue piece, keeping that out of the national table leadership discussions. Is
So
that
I'll-
accurate? Is that off?
I'll stir this up a little bit.
Yay!
right, So first you want to exclude people, which is not in our mission statement or any of our statements. We want to include everybody. So let's just throw that out there. The board's job is not to run the day-to-day operation and get the sponsors in that. That's all handled internally. So the board would be the overseer of this, but it would not be going out and saying, Diageo, we don't want your money because you want a board seat and you want everything slanted your way. We would say, the board would say, hey, this is great, but we can't take this, and this with that. They have to do that, because otherwise we wouldn't exist without those sponsors' numbers. So that's just
And
throw that in the bag.
Bobby, just to be clear, we're having a hypothetical conversation about who.
I'm just throwing that out.
So-
I'm putting all the little ifs, ands, and buts. I mean, yeah, it's great. Yeah, we love to get this all together and get everybody in there and be able to push this through, but you can't do it without some kind of backing behind it. I mean, I totally understand where it's going, and I know, if you look on the board right now, there's several reps on the board, but they're not operating as a rep for that brand that they're there for. They're there for us, and they're for the members, and I think that's what you have to kind of watch. And I mean, this is what this committee's for, is to kind of watch the watchers to make sure that they're watching the right thing.
Sure. I just want to make sure that I'm having like a super removed from reality conversation that I wanted Fuck Shit Up to go. Bobby, what you're bringing in is super important, like reality based things that are happening with the board. I think that is very, very valid. In hypothetical land, it's also important, and what I want to add to what Bobby said is that any organization's national board is not implementing anything. That's what staff do. They're not even really doing intense research on something, because that's what committees or task force do. So then at this like big round table of ideas of what USBG is and what it's going to stand for in the future, who should be sitting at that table, that was part one, and then who should not be sitting at that table, that was part two, in this hypothetical way. I didn't even think about some of the people who are on the national board currently working with suppliers, because I'm not even like bound to reality and how I'm thinking about this. The other thing that I would add that I actually disagree, Bobby, is that any association discerns who to include. And one of the hardest things about diversity and inclusion work is that you have to first pick who to exclude. And so by virtue of having membership dues, the only people who are members are people who have paid membership dues. And then maybe any living soul can pay membership dues, but that's like the first level of excluding people, right? Is that there are people who are members who paid dues. I don't think any organization has the resources to include every living human being on the planet. So you have to be able to discern who should be a member, who ought to be a member, and who actually is a member. And that's one of probably the more controversial takes on my inclusion work, is figuring out who are you intentionally going to exclude. So then you can also examine who you are unintentionally including and unintentionally excluding. Because then that gets to like the unconscious pieces of who the membership is open to, which then brings us back to board of directors, national leadership, decision makers, is that there are people who are excluded from that seat. There are people who are assumed will have access to that seat. So then between the assumptions and the actual exclusion, who would this be opened up to and who would it be closed to is the conversation that Allison and I were having. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yay for hypotheticals. And it's always good to remember that the board, I told this to Allison and she liked this, and Alina and Jeffrey, this might be helpful for you and kind of thinking about the mindset of what a national board leader is supposed to be doing. I think of national board of directors on like a very high terrace looking out over the lawn and saying like, what pretty flowers, versus like the landscaper who is pulling dandelion weeds. Right? Like there's a gap between those two perspectives. So they don't even see that they're dandelions, let alone do anything about the dandelions. They see the landscape and like the literally the full horizontal vantage point. That's the vision and the strategy setting. The like pulling the weeds, planting the seeds, putting a tree here, putting this here, planning the picnic, whatever, like that kind of stuff is staff or volunteers, not a national board typically position. USBG is a classic example of a working board where that line is very gray and is hopefully getting a little less gray. But I would also say that my impression of the chapter leadership is that that's gray as well. So the leadership of the chapter is often the only people doing anything for the chapters in order to be able to meet. But in theory, they should have that different vantage point as well. But they don't yet, right? So in a hypothetical place, who would be at that biggest terrace looking out to benefit the organization and who would not be there because they would limit the potential of the organization?
I'd like to see more national representation from organizations that are focused on education, not specifically about like cocktails or bartending necessarily, but like so like at a very like boots on the ground level, Jeffrey, your organization Turning Tables, I think would be a good one. We already talked about that. I would also say bartending schools. There's some stigma there, but a lot of working bartenders come through bartending schools. And also I think HRM programs, hospitality and restaurant, hotel and restaurant management programs at universities. UNO has one. There's even Cornell, we actually have a decent relationship with the HRM school at Cornell University. And I think those types of the people who are training hospitality professionals, both for boots on the ground jobs, entry level work, or to move up into management, I think those types of relationships would be valuable to nurture.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that I felt that the USBG was missing was an educational process, especially back when I was here the first time and going on to other cities, where it just started to be more of a, all right, here comes somebody with their wares. They're going to peddle it. They're going to tell you what's on it. They're going to tell you why it's fucking great. And then, okay, let's get drunk. That for me was not education at all. That was, there's a social aspect to the USBG, which I do and did enjoy, but the idea of let's just get a presentation and get free booze is not education at all. And I'm not saying that it's like that now because I'm not involved in it anymore. And I know that they try to bring in people and there's more of an education, especially when you talk about terroir and you talk about specific things. And even the people who are presenting the booze these days are more educated than they were before, where, my old ass, you'd get somebody and they'd be like, hey, buy this. And you'd be like, okay, what's it about? They're like, it's about $10 a bottle. It's like, that's not what I fucking asked. So there are things that have moved forward, but I'd like to see more education as well.
I know that there are, so now I'm thinking like outside of bartending world, right? So when we talk about unions, we can talk about HR. There's still some little ribbons to those Mylar balloons directly back to hospitality. But I could see someone from like an online education background that has nothing to do with bartending, but could very much help with any kind of educational programs that are available, creating kind of a vault of information that could be available for other people, even event planning or meeting planning, outside of hotel, restaurant, bar, reception kind of venues. I could see those also being really helpful. It's interesting. It took a couple of years when I would talk to people, and I would start off with, obviously, I am not in the industry. I'm not a bartender. I don't work in hospitality. And for the first couple of years, when I would say that, people would be like, well, then how can you help us? And totally valid question, but like, that's the bonus of an outside perspective. And so I can come in with an outside perspective, and then y'all have to figure out how to translate it into what makes sense for y'all. But I've also had to learn y'all and how my perspective could fit in. So thinking outside of the box, I would, those people may know nothing about hospitality, but they might know something else. So when we talk about who not to be at the table, we've identified some people who know some stuff about hospitality and may like misuse or underutilize their position because they're inside, and to be at the table, they may come with their own agenda, is to summarize. Are there other outside entities? Okay, let's follow this question. Other outside entities that are not connected to hospitality at all, that might think they are interested, but you think they should not be. So I have one example that I think everybody would consensus say no. If like the police academy, right? So as first responders, they might think alcohol poisoning, car wreck, something like that. They want to be on, somebody with a first responder background wants to be on the national board of the USBG. The USBG, to my understanding, would not see that connection and wouldn't necessarily think someone that in first responder world, not connected to hospitality, would need to be at that table. I would think that that would be an example of an outsider that's a no. Any other outsiders that would be no's? Y'all are nailing this hypothetical conversation.
The government in general?
Or like government, meaning maybe like the liquor license people or the policies,
Well, I think that the people who are doing policy and all of that for liquor need to get fucking trained. I'm not gonna lie on that one. Most of these motherfuckers who are running these places, especially in states like Oregon and Pennsylvania, have no fucking clue of what they're doing. Not at all. And I think that some sort of training and something like that for them to be a little bit better versed in that, or having something here in the USBG for somebody to be trained to do something like that would probably be a good idea. Because obviously it would be friendlier towards the liquor industry, not too many hoops to jump through because of the regulations that happen because of that.
Cool. And just to nudge you, Jeffrey, that would then be like a product or an educational line out of USBG that might be of interest. But this hypothetical question is them sitting at the table deciding that that would be something that they should do.
I don't think they have a fucking clue.
Yeah.
Right,
I
but
agree.
but
Yeah, no, I think
different
I think you're
question.
both basically saying the same thing, that we wouldn't want politicians or people
Right.
making those kind of policy decisions who are not always politicians. Sometimes they're bureaucrats, sometimes they're staffers, they got that kind of thing. So but do we want them making decisions on behalf of our organization? No. Do we want to be helping them make decisions because they affect us and our constituents? Yes. So how do we do that? We don't want them at every table, but we don't want them at our table, but we want to be at theirs.
Got it. But I think ultimately those distinctions are helpful, and maybe I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but maybe that's like part B of this question is whose table does USBG need to be sitting at? Does that make sense? Like, if the hypothetical is who should be and ought to be or should not be or ought not be at the national board leadership table for USBG, I guess we have like 10 minutes left, so I'll just ask that then. Of the national leadership of USBG, what tables, let's say just for funsies, not related immediately to the low-hanging ideas that we would have around hospitality, right? What leadership boards or leadership decision spaces should USBG potentially have enough people on its national leadership team to be connected to? So like, just to give you some examples, and this may be a hard question because you may not know things that are outside of your sphere, but like the PCMA, I can't ever remember what the P stands for, but it's a Convention Center Management Association. So all the convention centers in the country. There's a national organization for chambers of commerce. There's national organization for meeting planners. There's a national organization for association executive directors. Like, those are not related to hospitality, and yet they kind of have something to do with hospitality. They run conferences, they plan the conferences, they host the conferences. Are there, let's go with industries, if not associations, that someone from USBG could be a representative of this kind of hospitality in those spaces that might be helpful?
There are a lot of different sort of I think to piggyback what I was saying, kind of got us into this thread is the government piece, right? And that's at pretty much every level, because there's so many different decision-making bodies. And I think the COVID era sort of really laid this bare about that affect the lives, the day-to-day lives of bartenders and hospitality professionals in countless ways. So whether we're talking about something like big national policies about healthcare or workplace safety, those decisions that like state level decisions about how regulated liquor is in any given state, those are decisions that I want the USBG to be part of. Citywide decisions or countywide decisions about noise levels or zoning can have huge effects on the hospitality community, and all the way down to community organizations like neighborhood organizations have a huge amount of power when then city officials are making decisions about whether or not a bar can open or stay open. There's sort of informal nodes of power that wield a lot, and being in those rooms could be really valuable for local chapters on all the way up to the national organization.
Yeah, I kind of think of like the highest level function of a board of directors is kind of like a round table of experts. So even like if you take a president has a cabinet, and there's some presidents that will have a cabinet of all people of very similar approach or mentality. And then there's other presidents that will have a cabinet of wildly different people so that they can have their own little fuck shit up committee before they come up with a decision of something. So I, of course, lean towards door number 2. So USBG could be a really instrumental, different perspective. I guess that's why I thought of it too, because of the politicians and who's setting these laws and whatever. But if there's like a think tank, what would the topic of the think tank be that a representative from a USBG community would be really helpful that it is not currently a voice in? What would the topic be?
I mean, I think from a policy perspective that we have the potential to do a lot as far as, you know, harm reduction, safe nightlife spaces, things like that, that there's a lot of potential with our organization to be really effective working on things like that. Whether that's through, you know, legal policy or whether that's through cultural efforts.
Training too. I think we could do a lot of education around that, and we have offered some of those things in partnership with some of our other organizations that we work with, but doing more of that.
I know that I have brought up some of the things that I've learned within USBG and working with veterans organizations, because I've met so many veterans who are members of USBG. So like that's not really related to hospitality, but it is. Veterans are definitely related to USPG. That sentence seemed to need to come with the hand gestures. So if you're watching the video, the hand gestures are important there. Same thing with people who have been formerly incarcerated and who are now have jobs or who are now professionals or even entrepreneurs. I've used the USBG as examples a number of times that a felony is not a red flag inside this organization. It is something that is understood as a possibility. And y'all have figured out a way to work with people who have some kind of felonious record. Whereas other organizations I work with, that is a like thing that you have to keep to yourself. You hope they don't do background checks because you're not allowed to move forward with your life at all. So it's been really fascinating to be able to tell these people like you're being really short-sighted. Those two things came to mind. I can't think of anything else.
Well, on that note, I mean, our keynote speaker at the 75th is Brandon from Edwin's, and that's the program he runs at Edwin's Restaurant here in Cleveland. He was up for the James Beard, and he's nationally, internationally recognized for doing that, taking people right out of incarceration and prepping them through high-end restaurant work. And I've had the privilege of working with him this past year on a pop-up he did, and he's going to be our keynote. So if you really want to see what it's about, I mean, he's the guy that. That's what I'm saying. It's too bad you're not going to be there, Justin. Really like him, but yeah, you're right. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's awesome.
People will look at that.
It's interesting to this will be kind of my parting thought, and if anybody else has one, then we'll wrap up because I know people have places they have to go. But the USBG's mission, as stated, is to like elevate the standards of hospitality for everyone. And I find y'all doing some things just because it makes sense. Like you're not even doing it as like a virtue signal of inclusion. It just makes sense. That is so progressive and inclusive in comparison to my other clients. But you don't know what you don't know because you're just in this, and I think there's some real potential for USBG to be a voice that really shifts how other associations look at its members as an association, not as an employee inside hospitality, but as an association. And that those partnerships may lead to other people outside of hospitality coming and their perspectives being able to be really helpful at that like national board level, which is why we brought the question up. So dun, 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 dun. Any other parting thoughts? Alina, I'll let you go first and then we'll go to Jeffrey next. Parting thoughts?
I don't know if I have anything to add right off the top of my head.
Super dupes. If you think of something, you're welcome to email, of course, at any point in time. That's my cheesy smile. Jeffrey, any parting thoughts, ideas, questions, anything like that?
I got therapy in 3 minutes.
Boom. You know what? So do I. That's why. Yay for therapy.
Yay.
All right. Cole, any parting thoughts?
No, I didn't think of us necessarily. Like, I don't. Bob can attest to this. The last few years, every year not every year moving forward, but the last few years we reviewed the qualifications for local and national leadership in the organization. We've removed a lot of those barriers that were baked into the system before for people who had experience with the criminal justice system. I did not realize that might theoretically position as a thought leader within the association space by removing barriers to leadership for people who have that kind of experience. But I'm glad it does. And you're right, it's not why we did it. But
That's the coolest part.
Cool.
Is you didn't do it to be cool, and you didn't do it because you couldn't find anybody to be chapter leaders. So I guess we'll let people who have been incarcerated do it. You did it because what does that have to do with this?
Like, just felt like the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even the right thing to do. It's just a thing to do. Like, do you want to be a leader? Fantastic. Knock yourself out, which is technically, I mean, I'm pretty anti-prison, but like, that's technically how that works is you're supposed to like do your time and then come out as someone who has done your time. So you get a whole new life, but that is not how most people work. Most people would never let anybody who's ever been a night in jail be the treasurer of an organization, regardless.
The only difference between me and somebody who has spent many nights in jail is that I've been let off with a lot of warnings in my life. And I recognize that not everyone has that privilege.
I know there's some bonuses to being white, so many, but most of the associations I work with, even if you had a recent traffic ticket, you would not be allowed to be the treasurer. What? Like, anyway, people are weird, but you don't know. Anyway, okay. Top of the hour. Happy therapy to everyone.
Did Bob have parting thoughts?
Bob, I'm sorry. Do you have parting thoughts? Bob. Muted and driving.
I'm muted. I'm good. I'm sorry. I'm driving. I'm good. Yes.
That's okay. Parting thoughts?
Nothing.
Perfect. Well, y'all have a great time in Phoenix. And I'm sorry I will not be there. I will keep you posted on the next doodle.
All right.
Bye all. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.